This video, the start of our canning stock route series, is likely something completely different from any CSR video you've watched to date. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to visit all 51 wells on the CSR, where I'll share with you my first impressions of each well. Our regular long-form videos of our solo CSR travel will begin next week. Now, given that I've only allocated about 30 seconds per well, stick around as I get stuck into it. Well, number one, first impressions. Very surprised at how deep it is. The timber is still in great shape and it's all holding up, but it is now all completely disused. It's disattached to the whole canning stock route. It is sitting over on the west side of the Wiluna North Road, and the rest of the stock route is on the east side of that road. We are at Yawarakuju, well number 2. My impression of well number 2, although abandoned, is still fully formed well, still with water in it. I was expecting everything to be filled in and nothing left in these abandoned wells. Well 2 also has a steel tank, obviously put in at a later date because we've got a concrete pad on it, and that's inside of the tank. No trapped animals. Well 2A, the granites. Unusual in that it is surrounded by rocks, but it still has water in it. So I wonder how deep that actual hole is. First impressions about 2A, I was surprised that it was built with all of this granite, and secondly, it is so green here on the approach and on the exit, so they obviously knew where to dig. Well, 3 impressions. Well, it's fully restored. We pulled water out of it, and it was stinky. Stinky and yucky. I guess you could probably drink it. There you go, animals. But, ooh, you'd have to be pretty desperate. Have a look at Jill's back. There's about 6 billion flies on there. You have some friends. Well number 3A, cactus. This one is totally stuffed. It's about a 3-kilometer diversion off the canning stock route main road. So my impressions for this well, 6K diversion to see cactus. Impressions for 4A, and this is unique and the first time I've seen this. Although we've only been at 4 wells, but there's a tree, an original tree, and they've drilled a pulley into the top of it, and that pulley was used to lever the bucket up over the well. Then you dump your water in the trough, and it'll run down the trough, and your cattle will get their drink. Well, 4B impressions? It's an imposter. It was not put in by the original canning party in 1911. It was put in after the fact by Snell in 1929. Don't want to take away from the hard work that those boys put in, but it was not one of the originals. Well number 5, fully restored well with a big bucket and bright orange winch. And in the distance, a 60-kilometer-an-hour sign. That's got to be a piss take, isn't it? That water is a long way down. Well number 6, my first impressions. Beautiful, beautiful gum trees, large, massive gum trees in this Perry Springs, and a fully restored well that actually has a windlass. So if you've got yourself a horse or an ox, you can get water out that way. If you don't, you can use the old-fashioned crank method, which is exactly what we did. Fill up our jerry can with beautiful, sweet water. Well number 6 should be well number 10, as in 10 out of 10. We are in the deep depths of the Mulga. And we have found well 7, which has completely collapsed. There's no hint or no sign of any of the timber structure anymore, although it does have some water in it. So what's my first impressions on well number 7? Difficult to find, stuck in the dense mulga, and collapsed with no indication that it ever was a well. And if you did miss it, you might feel bad because you missed one of the wells on the canning, but you really wouldn't be missing anything. Well number 8. This is the first one where I've noticed the tailings from the diggings for the well itself, and it's a different color to the topsoil. And I think this is the first well that has been completely intact in terms of the timber structure, but completely dry. We're now at well number 9. The well itself, not much chop. The surrounding area, however, is massive and open, and it's still in use. I did not know that any of the original canning wells were still in use. That shows how they watered the cattle. You had the bucket, which was a 39-liter bucket, and that could be pulled out with this hand windlass. But then you had a big ass 200-liter bucket that went up and was pulled by animals, probably by the stock themselves. And that's how you could water a whole shit ton of animals. You didn't have to do it 39 liters in a go. Well, number 10. And there sure doesn't seem a whole lot left of this one. Yeah, she has collapsed for the most part. There is water in there. I heard it go kerplunk. My first impressions of well number 10. How the hell did they know to dig here? There is nothing to indicate that there is any water around here. Have a look at the surrounding countryside. Well number 11, or Goodwin Soak, as it's also known. Not much left of this sucker. It is, however, completely full of water, as you'd expect, because we're in a swamp. Impressions of well 11, sunk in the middle of a swamp. And I did not realize that Canning went back to Walloona from here and left some men behind to get some provisions, because here is where their provisions almost ran out. Well number 12, fully restored. This was refurbished 20 years ago, and it's still in pretty good nick. Beautiful, clean, lovely water with the well nestled in and amongst desert oaks. God love that. We have made it into well 13. A depression, a bucket, and what's left of the trough. 13 is not a lucky number for this particular well. She's fully collapsed, and it's about 2 kilometers off of the track to get in here. So even the track has abandoned this well. We are at well number 14. Believe it or not, there's a well in here somewhere. And there is the well, completely collapsed and filled in. Well number 13 has a twin sister, and that is well number 14. I wouldn't have expected twins in the desert, but there you go. We are at well number 15, and this is another one of those fully restored wells. My first impression of well 15 is it's the first one that I've seen earthen sides to it. Most of them have the timber slats, which you can see here, but then down a little bit further you've got some earthen sides. So well 15 is different from the rest in that respect. Cool. It's one of the only wells too that I've also seen the water levels recorded. So far in terms of water, you've got well 6, 12, and now 15 where you can get some decent water. Well, there we have it, folks. Well number 16. Let's go down here, try not to collapse the sides in and drown or fall to our death. No, only drops down about 5 feet and it's full of silt. Well 16 is all about the trough. Nothing much left of the well itself, but the trough stands out like the proverbial. Not in the best nick anymore, but you can see the full length of it. Well 16 and the trough. When is a well not a well? We are at water 17. The reason it's called water 17 is because Canning basically built a dam on a little bit of a river, and then the cattlemen could obviously use that water to water their stock. I'd show you it, but I can't, because I'm strictly forbidden from going in there. So my first impressions of water 17 or well 17, disappointment, a little bit of anger, and certainly some annoyance. Well number 18, where we have stopped and recommissioned our water supplies. And me being the expert hydrologist that I am, well 18 is one of those wells that just is not in an obvious place where you would dig. A couple of scrabbly trees, but these little scrabbly trees are everywhere out there. We did give the animals a drink as well. I hope they enjoy it. Well 18 first impressions were when I opened the lid, there were a whole bunch of brown skinks running around. And they're gone now. Here's the well and its contents. Beautiful water. Thank you for the drink, well 18. Believe it or not, you're looking at well number 19. That little depression in the ground, there's a trough, and that is really about it. Also, it's the first one that we've seen on the edge of a salt pan, so I don't know how they kept the briny taste out of the water being so close to a pan like this, but it must be good enough for the cattle to drink. So my impressions of well number 19, when is a well not a well? When it's a 19, there's nothing here. Well number 20. We've got ourselves a steel trough. We've got a star picket with a well 20 sign on it. And we've got a shallow depression in the ground with a bit of gravel around the perimeter to mark where the hole was dug. Well 20 is 9 kilometers off the CSR, 18-kilometer round trip. So if you're doing 20 kilometers an hour in here, it's going to take you an hour to get in and back out again. So if a mate says, hey, I've done the Canning Stock route, ask him whether he's done well 20 or not. 18-kilometer round trip off of the main CSR to see a steel trough and a sign that says well 20. The word for well 20 is dedication. You got to be dedicated to come back here. Well number 21. That's my first impression for this well. It's my wife's name, Jilkapuka. There's nothing left of this one. We got a big sinkhole. We got a steel trough and the little porry bit. And the bottom's got a little bit of timber in it and some grass growing. Oh look, a snake.
Gummy snake.
Well 23. There's really not a lot left of this one either. A little bit of a hollow depression here, crumpled up lid, a bit of the trough, but not even much of that anymore. My first impressions of well 23 are dilapidation central. I think this is probably the most dilapidated one we've seen. Well number 24. Isn't this one interesting? It's a little cesspool. Let's taste it. It is fresh. It's not brackish, but it looks brackish. We got all these paper barks around the well here as well. It's a cesspool surrounded by spooky trees. And these spooky trees are some kind of a paper bark. We're at well 25. That is fully collapsed. These posts here are the posts that used to hold the trough up. You can see how they used to sort of bracket the trough. Gee, that's brilliant timber to still be here 100 years later in this environment. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't souvenired some of this timber, to be honest. I'm glad they haven't, of course. So first impressions for me on well number 25, it's all about the trough and the timber framing around the trough. Now, well 26 is fully restored and we're going to grab some water and recommission our water supplies. But my first impressions of 26, before we've pulled any water out of it, is actually the trough. The galvanized trough on this well is in excellent condition, more so than almost any of the other wells that we've seen. I seriously doubt that's the original trough. Although you get rotted out sections like that, it makes me wonder. We are at well number 27, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot left other than a small depression in the ground. A little forest of melaleucas around it, I guess to indicate there is water here, and the bucket with a lock on it. My first impressions with this well is that if it had water, you couldn't get it out anyway, because somebody's put a lock on the bucket.
There's a bucket and a lock. Wop, wop, wop.
Here's what we've got at well 28. A bucket and the old pulley system, and that is it. The well itself has completely silted in. All of this sand around here looks like it must have flowed in here from floods, and I'd say that has just buried the well in its entirety. So this is the first well that we haven't even seen a depression. It is completely obliterated. First impressions on this well is, where's the well? Well number 29. We've got a depression in the ground, an old fuel drum, and a tiny bit of the trough. And that is it. Wow. What is my first impression of well 29? It's impressionless. If I didn't have this video footage to remind me what this well looked like, it would leave no mark in my mind whatsoever. Welcome to well 30, where we have a depression in the ground, some rusted out trough, and one lid which appears to be in decent condition. My first impressions of this well are we've just entered a forest, what I would call a forest, and I know it's all relative, but before this we were in sand dune country and it was very, very few trees. Full-grown trees, well dug in the middle of a soak, surrounded by a forest. We are now at well 31. We spent the night here, only about 200 or 300 meters away. And what do we got at 31? We got the original trough, we got half a lid, got a crank handle, and that's really about it. The well itself is fully collapsed. My first impressions about this well are all about the trees, actually. It's the first time that we've hit ghost gums, and they're proper big-sized trees as well. So well 31 for the ghost gums. We are now at well number 32, and this is an interesting well because there's nothing here. If you didn't have that sign there, you'd never know that there was a well here. There's no steel. Oh, hang on, I stand corrected. What do we got? I got an old piece of trough and one of the doors. and the most shallowest little depression in the ground. That's it. So my first impressions of well 32 are: 1, there's nothing here; 2, it's in beautiful golden spinifex; and 3, it's absolute hell to get here. Whether you're coming north or south, it doesn't matter. You got to take on those corrugated roads, and there ain't no way around it. We're at well number 33, just outside of Coonawirrigi. The way this sucker works is that is actually an operational windmill that fills up this tank, and the overflow for the tank goes into this little depression here, and that's where the animals get their drinks. Unfortunately, the gearbox has some stripped gears in it apparently, and they're waiting repairs. The tank is only about half full, and she's going down quickly. My first impressions of well 33 are, it's actually very serene. It's lovely and grassy around here, and I was expecting this to be an absolute parking lot. You know, coming out here for the little bit of stick the flag in the ground, claim to fame sort of thing. I did a little bit of the canning, but in actual fact, there's not a soul here. We're here at well 34, and the microphone won't pick it, but the trees are just humming with bees or some sort of insect. I hope it's bees and not flies, because as soon as they find out we're here, they're going to be on us. Here's the well. It's on the edge of a clay pan in the middle of the desert. We've got a bit of rusted out trough and a hole. Looks like animals have actually dug that a little bit. And there's the clay pan that it's sitting on the edge of, surrounded by sand dunes everywhere. So what were my first impressions of this well? It has to be the buzzy trees. We made it to well 35. We got a couple of drums standing sentinel, a couple of star pickets and posts, and not much of anything else. Well, we got the bucket and the crank handle and a depression where the well used to be, and that is it. It's set amongst all of these melaleucas everywhere, which is beautiful, but these ones aren't buzzing like the last wells were buzzing. So what are my first impressions of well 35? Loneliness. And I don't know why this well would be any lonelier than any of the other wells. It seems forgotten, and it shouldn't have been. Maybe because it's set in such a beautiful location. I don't know. Interesting anyway. We have arrived at well 36, also known as Kill. There's a very large steel structure over it. I'm not sure what that was there for. And this has been carted out recently. Have a look at that. That's sitting on top of that piece of grass, and that's been set on there very recently, since that grass grew. Perhaps this is getting set up for recommissioning. You can pull water out of the well. It's not too far down there, but you'll need your own bucket and you'll need your own rope. The well itself is set in this little depression, almost like, I guess, a mini lake, surrounded by all these melaleucas. Well 36, first impressions, giant A-frame, and serve yourself water with your own bucket and your own rope. We're at well 37 now. And here's what we got left of it. There is some water in there, but it's a bit stinky. And obviously this well has pretty much packed it in. Little finches flying around everywhere here. And the well itself is dug in the middle of this sort of clay pan, or this depression. And all around it are sand dunes, and on all of those sand dunes around it are desert oaks. But there's one thing that this well is known for. Let's go check it out. And this is it. Graves. 4 people in total have died here. In this particular grave site are 2 drovers that were killed in 1911, and in this one, an unnamed Chinaman, also killed in 1911. Now you might recount the story that I told back at, I think it was well 10, where after these murders, and you could call them nothing else, the canning stock route was basically abandoned for about 20 odd years because people were afraid to come out here because they might get speared by the natives. The 4th grave, which I do not know where it is, but it's around here somewhere, is from somebody who was speared in 1922, and he worked for the Loch Oil Exploration Company, again speared in this very location. So for that reason, some people call this the haunted well, and that's the overarching impression that I've got of the well. Not a bit being haunted, but just that a great tragedy happened here over 100 years ago. Well 38, what do we got here? Got a bit of trough, we got a pulley, a sign that says 38, and we got a dead chair from like 1970. Now this wasn't actually a well, it was water that pooled in a rock hole. So let's go down there and see if we got any water in it. Well, what do you friggin' know? There's some water in there. Unbelievable. Let's go down and take a look. Well, there you go, hey? Real genuine water. It doesn't even look that feral, actually. You know, there's a little bit of green growing in it, but it's clear enough. Tastes beautiful. Lots of buzzy wasps around. That wall there, which runs into the rock hole, that looks constructed to me. That's just keyed in there far too nicely to be a natural formation. There has been a reasonable amount of water flowing through here to carve out these little circular holes. You normally see that in major flowing rivers. More of those little holes here. And apparently there's grooves in the rocks around here where the original tribes used to sharpen their tools. So what are my first impressions of well/water 38? Very surprised, actually, that we found water in there, and it was clean looking water too. A lot of natural history here, which was super cool. Welcome to well number 39, Kakapanu. Here's the well itself. There is actually a bit of water in there. It's protected by a roof rack. Coming from the south, you come up over that dune and you can see this well in the foreground. And the first thing you see are these drums, these old fuel drums. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And that was my first impression of this well. Well 39, the drum well. And here we are at well number 40. And this is one thing we haven't seen a lot of here, is actual clay pans. In this Gibson Desert or the Great Sandy Desert or the Little Sandy Desert. Whereas you go in the Simo and there are clay pans everywhere. But here's the well itself. A little bit of a depression in the ground and there's not a whole lot more left of it. Only a few hundred meters from well 40. Is Michael Tobin's grave. He was a member of Canning's survey party and he was speared here at well 40 back in April of 1907. Unbelievable. So even when these guys were surveying this line, they knew that there were hostilities out here. So if you were a drover taking this on early on in the piece, boy, you'd be looking over your shoulders, wouldn't you? Far out. So what's my first impression about well 40? Well, it's all about this clay pan for me. Rarely seen clay pans in these deserts, and certainly never seen a well on a clean clay pan like this one. We're at well number 41. This is the old trough, but the well itself has been fully restored. And we've just recommissioned with water. Check this out. This is the first well that I think that I can remember anyway, with the windlass pole and that pulley. But this well's been fully restored. The water is beautiful. It's tannin stained, but it tastes beautiful. No problem with it at all. So what are my first impressions with well 41? It's got to be this windlass pole and this pulley. I don't think I've seen one completely functional. And if I have, you have to forgive me because we're at well 41, so we've done 40 of these already, and you start to lose track after a little while. Well 42. And what have we got here? We got a pool of, I don't know, that's a cesspool. I'm not going to be taste testing that one. We got a few bones, and we got a lump of wood that was probably part of the well system, but that is it. So what's my first impression of this well? This one is on the nose. It is stinky. Oh, hello, little birdies. They don't seem to mind the stinky water, but whoo, she's on the nose. Somebody's left an old fuel tank here as well. What the hell? Welcome to well 43, also known as Billowaggy. Old trough and bucket, and I guess this hole here was the well. Not a whole heck of a lot left. Well 43 is also on the edge of one of these little depressions. I guess you could call it a lake. All dried up now, of course, but I guess that was a really good indication for them that there was potential water around here. And maybe the water table reasonably close to the surface. There was also a native well located here, obviously long before the canning was ever built, and that probably helped these guys decide where they were going to sink it as well. So what are my first impressions of 43? It's actually this bucket. There's the standard buckets that we've seen at every single well, and this is the first time that we've had one of this style. So it is different from all the other wells. Well 43, the different bucket well. Welcome to well number 44. We got a couple of the original doors, we got some pipe work, and we've got the trough, which is pretty much filled in with sand now. And at the very end of the trough there is the bucket. This is one of the least obvious places to put a well, actually. There's nothing around here that really indicates any water. So what's my first impressions of this well? Well, unfortunately for the well, it's not about the well, it's about the track that got us here. The north-south section between 43 and 44 is fantastic. But the best sand driving so far on this track has been that section between 43 and 44. And that's what I'm going to remember well 44 for. 44 for? Well number 45, with a beautiful ghost gum growing out of it. We got the old bucket, a couple of lids, a bit of trough, and a depression in the ground. And that is it for 45. I got two impressions on well 45. One is the crap track getting in here, terribly overgrown. And secondly, a ghost gum growing out of the well. Very cool. We are now at well number 46. And the closest I can get to it is with the drone. So I'll drop some drone footage in because this entire well area is completely flooded out from the cyclone still. These scars in the track behind us are from that 200 series that was bogged. I think it took them about a day to get them out of here. That's nasty. So what's my first impressions of well 46? When we were here, she be flooded. Welcome to well number 47. This little sucker is about 3.5 kilometers off the main track, so you got to take a little bit of a detour to get back here. And judging by how overgrown this is, I wouldn't say too many people actually bother doing the detour. We got ourselves a depression in the ground. We got ourselves a trough in reasonably good nick, just filled up with sand, and 2 buckets. Now, why does this well get 2 buckets? Maybe one was starting to rot out, so they replaced it when they did some refurbishments. Just looking around at the surrounding area, there is nothing to differentiate this site from anything else around you that might indicate that there's water here. 47 is the double bucket and triple termite mound well. Thanks for the memories, 47. What you are looking at in all its glory is well 48, and that is one depressed little hollow that used to be a well. Holy guacamole, I thought there were a lot of buckets at the last well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this thing, whatever it is, and there's not much of anything else here. Man, could you imagine finding this spot and saying, yeah, we're gonna dig here, and you gotta dig through all of this rock. Jeez, pickaxe and shovels, that would have been hard going. It's not like that sand country. But my first impressions here on well 48 have not a lot to do with the well, but more its location. It's at the base of the Braden Hills out there, and it's spectacular. It's probably got the best outlook of all of the wells. Welcome to well 49. Looking at this troughing and the bracing around the troughing, you'd think that this well is toast. Well, in actual fact, it has been restored, and it has got some very good water in it. So, for us, this is the last well that has good water. If you're heading south, it's going to be your first well that has good water. Well 49 does have a toilet, and it's also got a makeshift ranger's hut, which is basically a shipping container underneath a bit of color bond roof. But hey, it gets the job done, I guess. My first impressions with this well is, holy smoke, she's deep. That's probably 30 feet, maybe 35 feet down there. Well number 50. What have we got here? A depressed hollow, the old timber for the troughs, and a few old buckets. And that is it for well 50. My first impressions of this well were influenced by that massive clay pan that we crossed to get in here. All those lovely white snappy gums growing out of it. And then boom, here we are at the well, at the side of the clay pan. Looked like there was pretty decent camping around that clay pan as well. Just probably be a little bit dusty. So first impressions of this well, right beside the old clay pan. Somebody on the track told us that the bindies at well 51 were next level. Yep, they are. There's our well 51. The only thing we've got left is a depression in the ground, and a very shallow one at that. Bit of cow poo laying in it, and that's about it. That windmill's seen better days as well. Looks like it got hit by a cyclone. It's been chewed up and spat out. So what are my first impressions of well 51? Well, I guess it's more about the emotion than anything else.
Depression.
Depression like the well. Definitely we've got a bit of sadness because it's the end of the journey, but also, I don't know, I feel like a great sense of accomplishment. You know,
too.
We've been out here solo for 3 weeks doing the Canning Stock route. That's pretty special.
Route. You still haven't got it yet.
Well done, hon.
All right.
Good job.
All right.